when I started Octopolis, I was thinking that drawing octopuses would be easy. Uh, I was really self-conscious about my ability to draw people, and octopuses seem safe. Their bodies are squishy and amorphous. It's easy to adapt to a cartoony style, and if it's a little off, then nobody will be able to like call out the octopus anatomy being incorrect. And so when I first started drawing octopuses, I made a lot of mistakes in terms of the anatomy. You can take a look at this. This is a cartoon, but the a couple things that are obviously wrong to me now that make me cringe. It has two siphons. Octopuses only have one, but I didn't realize that at the time. And more unforgivably, I was giving these octopuses mouths, which they do not have. Their beak is underneath the web, and if you ever see a mouth on the outside, it makes me a little sad inside because one of the reasons that I think octopuses were important, or like why I found them so fascinating, is because they are so different. And I think the reason that Octopolis as a concept stuck with me for all of the years that it was sort of just like floating around in my head as like this thing that I wanted to make, was because of how alien they were. Gave me this theme that I could like really expound upon concepts that were important to me. I wanted to be able to talk about marine animals and the ocean, uh, and environmental conservation, but also the sort of social questions about the evolution of empathy, how game theory influences social development, the way that civilization is sort of this accumulation of habits that have developed as a result of our biology. And octopuses are perfect for talking about this because they're so alien, they're so different from us, and yet they are intelligent. Their unique biology means that their octopus society would be completely different from ours, just because of that fact. But there would be similarities because there are similarities across intelligences, just because the nature of intelligence has similarity. Even though octopus brains are completely different evolutionary trees from us, we can recognize them. So, yeah, in exploring these differences, I'd be able to say something about people through my story. But also because of that, it was very important to me that these were actual octopuses in Octopolis. They're not bipedal cephalopods that act like people. They're not cartoon animals that are like metaphorical archetypes for human people. No, these are like actual octopuses. And so I got really obsessed with like drawing actual octopus anatomy and making sure that they were like biologically close to octopuses. And I got really obsessed with that. And so yeah, let me tell you, drawing octopuses is like tremendously complicated. The more I learned about it, the more difficult it seemed to get. And if you try and draw them with full detailed accuracy, well, you're gonna have a really tough time. It's gonna take you forever. And I was like, oh, I need to draw an entire comic book. So I had to simplify, and I started making decisions on like where I was going to compromise and how I was going to stick to my guns. This is an early exercise that I did where I drew like a realistic octopus as well as I could, and then I tried to draw the same octopus and like add some emotion to it. So over the years and like having drawn this whole comic, I think I've developed a pretty decent system about how to efficiently draw an octopus. So without further ado, I'm going to yeah, draw an octopus here, and I encourage all of you, if you have pen and paper in front of you, to draw your very own octopus. So, like most drawings, we start with a circle. Circles are pretty easy shapes in conceptually, but I've used a digital tool to draw my first one because even I have trouble drawing a perfect circle. So if you're physical drawing, well, good luck. We're going to turn the circle into a sphere, and we do that by adding ellipses. So these kind of just sort of like hint at the shape of the entire like three dimensions of the octopus. And can everybody see this okay? Awesome. This is going to be like the direction that the octopus is looking in. And you can like look at it like a bit of an Escher painting. Like I'm going to pick these two little notches are going to be where the eyes are. So that's your octopus's head. And from there, we're just going to build out. So second circle is going to be the mantle. And we've talked a lot about octopus flexibility, and octopus mantle can be almost anywhere on their body as long as it's in the back of the head. It's sort of like coming out of the top or the back or the lower part. It's always coming out from behind the eyes, but there's a ton of flexibility as to where you actually put it, which is going to be a theme for this entire thing. So here I've just picked the mantle here. Octopus mantles, like again, like there's tons of different species, but they tend to be roughly the same mass as the arms, at least from my observations, exceptions, everywhere. And so I have it here like roughly like 1.5, maybe 2 times the size of the head. In Octopolis, I've made the mantle sort of consciously a bit smaller than in real life, so that there's a little bit more of a stronger silhouette. But that's, we're going to try and draw like a real octopus today. Next, we're going to add a couple more circles for eye bulges. This is a little optional, or like basically you can, again, decide how much you want your octopus's eyes to bulge. And they just go on either side of the head. And so now we have roughly the outline that we're going to follow in order to do the octopus's mantle. And so the mantle is going to connect the head and the mantle circle with these two lines here. You're gonna, I don't know how to describe it. You want to take the furthest point on each circle and connect them. It doesn't need to be a straight line. In fact, it shouldn't be. But just kind of like draw a wide, like a bit of a curve that connects them, and then close off the mantle. So you kind of got like a peanut shape here. And then let's draw in the bulges too. So the left and the right bulge. And now you have the octopus's mantle. This is a good step. Everybody should be proud. Next, we're going to do the second half of the octopus, which is the arms, which are honestly the most complicated part. So still got ways to go here. And we're going to do another ellipse. This ellipse is going to represent the sort of web skirt, basically like the halfway point between the arms and the tips of the arms. And it's going to go almost anywhere. It just has to be below the head. It could go, you could do it out here. If you wanted to do like an octopus that was hunting and doing like a really wide attack, you could like make a really big ellipse. Honestly, like this is up to you. And octopus being in so many different positions, you could do that. There's an endless array of opportunities here. So I'm just going to stick with the example that I included in the PDF. And here's an ellipse. And then we're going to connect the head to this. If I had made any, unique observations in this process, it's that an octopus is basically like two circles on top of a cone. So these two lines connecting to the ellipse are kind of like you can see the cone shape going on there. And it doesn't have to be a straight cone. Like obviously that's not very realistic, but it would work. And you can have this line connecting the head to the ellipse in almost any direction. You could have it curve out, like that. This still looks normal. I could see an octopus looking like that. You could have it go inwards, like a very kind of narrow look. There is almost no incorrect way to connect these lines together, but it's a choice, and you decide based on where you put these lines, what position your octopus is going to be in. So here we now have an outline of the mantle and the web skirt. We're going to clean that up a little bit and continue with more guidelines, because I think one of the more important things to me is that this is sort of matching roughly the physicality of an octopus. And to do that, I want to make sure that even if I'm not drawing all the arms, I have them in the right spot. And so I'm going to use this ellipse as a bit of a divider. And just like do 4 lines crossing like a pizza. And then these are going to represent sort of the quadrants that the arms are in. And I'm not super happy with that, but you know, this is meant to be casual. Let's divide up these quadrants into arms, and they don't have to take up the full space. Again, like octopuses can have different thicknesses of arms, so there's a lot of flexibility here. And now, once like personally, once I have that, I can kind of visualize how the arms connect. And this is, something that comes with practice, I think. But generally, you want to make sure that the center line of the octopus's head goes to a space in between two arms. Um, of the 8 arms, there is like 2 in the very front. So you don't want like a single arm like an elephant's trunk. So just make sure, use these guidelines and very light pencil strokes if you're working in paper to make sure that you have an idea in your head where these arms are coming from, because they're all sort of like expanding centrally from this head. And there you have this, zoom out a little bit. There's the octopus. But it's not the full octopus. Obviously, you've got the rest of the arms. And so, based on this guideline, hopefully you can draw the other rest of the arms. And here's where you can have a little bit of fun. I like to draw like fun little spirals. And again, be light here because you probably aren't going to draw the arms correctly on the first try. At least I never do. Um, Arms, so this is a note that I put in the guide, but octopus arms are all kind of roughly the same size. There are exceptions to this. But one of the things I see when people are drawing octopuses is that a lot of times one or two of the arms are like obviously like way longer than the other arms. And if you're drawing a blanket octopus, well then that's correct. But drawing most any other kind of octopus, then you want to be roughly the same size. And to avoid getting called out for that myself, I kind of tend to hide them after a certain point. I'm like, okay, this arm is just going to curl up into nothingness or into a spiral that can't be seen. So you can see like these back 3 arms, not even gonna draw them because they're not visible here, and I'm already like a little tight on time. I want to be respectful of all your guys' time. So here's like the rough arms. I'm just doing like cute little spirals for simplicity's sake. And now we have an actual octopus here. So with the guidelines in place, I usually then go and start adding in darker lines. So we're going to start with the webbing. And the webbing this is like sort of fleshy parts that come in between the arms. And I usually place it right around where the ellipse ends. We were talking about this before people joined, but octopus webbing is incredibly flexible. It's also dependent on species. So certain octopuses can extend their webbing all the way to the tips of their arms. And in that case, if that's the case for your octopus, you can draw really short arms. Maybe a serrate octopus with some fins on the mantle. That's totally fine. But here I'm kind of doing like I don't know, a generic coconut octopus type. And so the mantle is going to be, sorry, I'm not talking about the mantle, I'm talking about the web. The web's going to go right here. Cool. So that's the webbing, and then we are going to get to the real hard part, which is the suckers. This takes the longest, admittedly, and so for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm just going to do nice little semicircles. There are a lot of different ways to do suckers, and if you really want to do detailed suckers, then you could be here all day or all night, I suppose. But while we're on the subject, like talking about cartooning, it's about simplification. And I found like the very first drawings I did of Octopolis, they were incredibly detailed. Like I was spending all this time on suckers trying to get, the individual articulation to be accurate in every panel that I drew. And well, for one thing, it like took forever, but also it wasn't a very effective storytelling device. Comics in general are about simplification because it's not important. I think Charles Schulz said this. You don't have to be a good artist to be a good cartoonist, but you do have to be a clear artist. And uh, if there's no motion, if people can't tell what's going on in your drawings, then I mean, you can be an incredible like fine artist, but you're not going to be a cartoonist because it's going to take people too long to absorb what they're looking at. And so that's, I think, one of the things that distinguishes fine art from cartooning. Cartooning is about communicating something clearly. And if you put a ton of detail, like in the suckers, then your audience is going to be looking at those suckers instead of thinking about whatever the action is that you're trying to communicate. So that's why, I don't feel bad about hiding the suckers if it works for the drawing. If you're drawing an octopus from far away, if you're doing like some quick action, then you don't need to draw the suckers. People will get it. They remember. And that's how cartooning works. It's how animation works in a lot of different ways. You're all like messing around with the sort of illusion of human perception. Like none of this is real. This is just a bunch of lines on a page. I think this looks like an octopus. All right, got the arms down, got some loose suckers there. I'm not gonna, if you want to dive into details on the suckers, do please check out the PDF. I drew some suckers that I'm rather proud of on that. And these ones, well, they're loose. They're rough suckers. What was the next step I put in the guide? Right. I think I just sort of started erasing the guidelines, and here you have it. This is an octopus, but there's still an opportunity for detail. So you still want to like add shadow, allude to the space between the arms. You might want to like, usually if I'm adding detail, it's to make the image more clear. Like I want to make sure that the depth of these arms being further away, like this is behind that other one. All right, and then oh, almost forgot the siphon. Siphon is probably the hardest part to like understand about how the octopus works. It's like these like several interlocking flaps of skin that go all the way around the head. And it can be in like a gazillion different positions, depending on like what the octopus is doing. So there's like plenty of ways to draw it correctly if you know what like conceptualizing what you're trying to draw. But a lot of times I see like there's no seal in the way people draw octopuses. You just see like the siphon coming straight out of the body, and that's not inaccurate necessarily, but it doesn't really indicate like a degree of specificity and intentionality a lot of times. So yeah, the siphon, you can do a lot with it, and the easiest thing to do is just to draw like kind of a little semicircle here, and then you can draw the siphon here on the left. Just don't do two of them like I did when I was first starting out. And then finally, I usually like to leave the eyes for last because the eye is the window into the soul. And then I'm kind of looking at them. There we are. One thing, I guess element of detail I didn't talk about yet were the papillae. So like octopuses and like adjust the texture of their body. Dana talked a lot about this in her comic, but they can sort of express their emotions. That's a useful tool for me as a cartoonist because sometimes, you want to like add some kind of expression or like detailed element about the octopus that is still accessible to people. And I also don't want to give them mouths. So if I can give them papillae that helps the audience recognize who we're looking at, then that's pretty helpful. All right. Everybody got one? 3, 2, 1. Warren asks, was that anyone's first octopus?
I'm always surprised sometimes because I remember we did one of these too, and like when I watch you do it, it looks like magic. As somebody who's like, I don't draw, I don't really, write anymore. I'm like always typing. So when I see you just like how masterfully, because you've drawn probably thousands of octopuses at this point. So it's just like how just effortless these strokes are. Just I'm watching in awe. Just like I don't think my stroke did that, but it's fun. It's fun to watch.
Thank you. I'm definitely relying on the digital medium significantly. I think if I had to draw octopuses on paper, I don't know if I could do a comic because you have to, know like I have to visualize where the arms are going before I actually draw in all the suckers or like the lines and whatnot. And I rely really heavily on having layers in digital so that I can draw over my guidelines and then erase them afterwards. It's been really amazing to uh, finally be able to share this comic with all of you, and I'm just like incredibly grateful that you all have enjoyed it or supported out of interest or like compassion, and been here with me tonight to sort of celebrate this occasion. Um, um, yeah, I'm very grateful and excited to continue building this community and making more art because it's been incredibly gratifying. Let's do one last question for all the speakers. What is your one favorite octopus species? That is hard. All right, I will go first and say mine so that nobody steals it. But the larger Pacific striped octopus has to be my favorite because it is kind of the the basis for the octopus society that I have built in Octopus. If you look behind me, this is a print of a drawing by Arcadio Rodnice, who first described the LPSO, and nobody believed that it actually existed because what he was describing was so incredible. This octopus would mate and lay eggs multiple times without dying. They shared dens with one another, and they even would mate face to face. So they had all these social characteristics that nobody thought octopuses could actually exhibit. And he drew this and he submitted a description, and it was like rejected out of hand because he was, a scuba diver and not like a full scientist with doctorate. And it just sat there for like 20 years until some folks from the Cal Academy of Sciences got a hold of actual specimens, and they brought them into the aquarium and they validated totally everything that he had described. It's just a great story, and the octopus themselves are like really cool and fascinating, and so that's why they're my favorite. Jesse, I pick you.
Yeah, I am gonna choose the blue ring octopus. It's not a species I've worked with, but it's always been one that I've been curious about because you see it all over, the internet as like, most potentially the most dangerous octopus, whatever. But I've always been a fan of coloration, bright colors. They kind of remind me of nudibranchs a little bit. I know they're not related at all, but uh, for that same reason.
Well, they are mollusks.
It's true. A little bit of related.
Mine is the vampire squid, which is my excuse to talk about how vampire squid are not true squid and are actually in the larger group octobrachians because they're more closely related to octopuses than they are to squid. So there we go. I love them. Vampire squid are adorable. You usually don't see any scale bars if you see a picture of vampire squid, so you'd be forgiven for thinking they're like huge and terrifying, but they're like very small, like
They're like the size of a
your
football.
hands. You know, like
Yeah.
little squid and little octopuses, I should say, and they don't drink blood. They don't even hunt. They're not predators. They just like sort of gently collect all of the poop and detritus that falls through the ocean. So they're like these like garbage collectors performing a beautiful service in the deep sea, and they're very careful parents. Their whole spawning procedure is very like slow and cautiously done, and I just love them. They're so charming. They have these beautiful blue eyes, and they're very closely related to octopuses, so there you go.
I think it counts.
I always I always change mine. Like, I always feel like when I meet somebody and or there's like a scientist that's particularly fascinated about whatever, they can like sell me on what makes their, what they love so cool. And so I remember meeting Cheyenne, and he told me about the smooth skin octopus that like dives into sediment and creates like these, almost like ants create like these intricate tunnels. They're an octopus that burrows and can create tunnels. But the one that I bring up most often, because I think if you search like hairy octopus on Google, we're the number one person that talks about it, is just like there's just this underdog or undo-octo species where it's like, I mean, our audience calls them like tube octopuses. And they just look like these disheveled like underwater hair models. Like you look at them and you're just like, oh my gosh, like get yourself together. And then
Bad
even
hair day.
yeah, and even with them, like what I love about them too is that like they'll just throw themselves up into, the water column and just kind of like let the ocean currents kind of take them to where they want to go. Like I had this video right here where it just like throws itself and it's like, okay, like look like anything other than an octopus right now. And they're called like the holy grail of like octopus finds. And I just love how they could just kind of move around and people look for them. But it almost doesn't look real. And I love my most favorite thing about underwater photography. I'm not an underwater photographer, but that the cameras are getting so good now that we can see the detail of these octopuses. I've always been so obsessed with underwater photographers that have great equipment, just because we're finally being able to see like chromatophores, or like if you like zoom into this webbing and just kind of like I could like just stare at this and just kind of I don't know, just like look at stuff. I'm obviously super obsessed, but like they never get old to me. I could talk about them all day.
They don't have a scientific name yet, right?
No. Yeah, there's a lot of undescribed, and I believe too, just like as we're, Chelsea, she recently was doing some work on, swabbing octopuses, bellies and kind of figuring out different species within, the Atlantic region. It's just like there are species that we think are the same just because we haven't dug deeper into their research, or into their like DNA. And I'm sure there's like thousands and thousands of species. The science just hasn't caught up with how incredible octopuses are. But as we, focus more and more on them, we would learn so much, which is so fun. Chelsea was sending me the other day all these different articles that are now coming out that are just so fun, and I can't wait to write about them and talk about them on Octonation. And so yeah, every single day it's just fun it's a fun community, and so I'm glad we all have each other.
Yeah, it's been really fun to sort of contribute to the octopus community and to offer like use this book as an opportunity to like give voices to you folks, to my like modest little audience. Thank you everybody who's here, and I really appreciate you coming on and supporting Octopolis. Dana, you're on Instagram and Blue Sky, and your website is your name. Or you're everywhere as Octonation and octonation.com. Definitely check that out if you haven't already become a member. And Jesse, I know your socials are on Instagram, so if you want to see some of your great underwater photography, it's 4 S's and 4 E's, Jesse Tree. And then I don't know if you have a personal website, but I put up the Aquarium of the Bay, which is a wonderful little aquarium in San Francisco if you're local. It is in the incredibly touristy Pier 39, but it itself is not that touristy. And I think, it's a community of really caring and thoughtful aquarists and biologists who have a really nice space to host animals, especially local animals from around the bay. So if you've been an aquarium in the bay, definitely don't sleep on it. All right. Thank you all. I alluded to this, but I am working on Octopolis issue 2, definitely. The first step actually is I have an outline for an entire graphic novel that would be 2 through 6. And I'm working with my new agent, Jen Azantian, to see if I can pitch that as a full graphic novel. If we can, then great. Then issue 2 will be extra long and probably take a little bit longer than the next Kickstarter, but it will give me a lot more flexibility and freedom. So fingers crossed that something comes of that. But if not, then I will be working on issue 2 and self-publishing it. So there's more Octopolis to come. I appreciate you all for joining me on the journey this far, and I hope you continue to join me with the next steps, whatever they may be.